Welcome back to another episode of Dear Jane. I'm your host, Marcy Little. My co-host is Scott Baker. How's it going, Scott?
Going well. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm struck by how important it is to have our facts straight and our data accurate as we're engaging in conversations about life.
I love when we talk to really smart people
Yeah.
within the movement. That have the data, have the facts. They cut through the talking point nonsense and all that, and so that's why I'm excited about today.
Yeah, today's episode is going to be fantastic, especially in light of so many sensational headlines that seem to paint one picture, and then you don't even have to dig very far into the data to understand that it all is sensationalized and it's not true. So guests today are going to love hearing from our guest on the episode today. Before we introduce him, though, Scott, can you tell us a little bit about today's sponsor, Cogency Strategic?
Be happy to. Cogency Strategic. So there are going to be roughly about 10 states, give or take, still being decided that we're going to have political battles this fall where they're going to decide state constitutional amendments that would, if they pass, would more or less enshrine unlimited, unrestricted abortion into state constitutions. It's really, really bad. So we need to win these political fights. The bad news is the pro-life movement has not had much luck. The good news is Cogency Strategic now has come along to change the nature of the fight. They are experts in not only what to say, but how to say it, where to deliver it. They are all passionately pro-life at Cogency Strategic. They are basically of a one-track mind, proudly. They care about the life issue and they care about winning these battles. It's not just another political opportunity for them. They take this very, very personally, and they've got all kinds of ways to deliver your message to the right voters to make sure that they turn out and support pro-life initiatives and vote pro-life come election day. So you really need to, whether you're a large organization or even if you're small and you're just wanting to weigh in and at least have some sort of impact on your state's ballot issue, you need to reach out to them to see what they can do. And they can even help you raise some money to get it done. That's Cogency, Cogency, cogencystrategic.com.
Definitely check them out. Now for today's episode, we are joined by Dr. Michael New. He is an assistant professor at the Catholic University of America and also a senior associate scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. You're going to love today's episode. Let's get into it. Dr. New, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So the journal JAMA Pediatrics recently released a study that purportedly showed that the Texas Heartbeat Act led to a sharp increase in infant deaths in 2022. What's the truth there?
The truth is that study is very misleading, and the way the mainstream media covered the study was also misleading. They were very quick to just regurgitate a press release. They didn't, in most cases, actually probably read the study on their own, and they certainly didn't reach out to pro-life groups or pro-life experts for comments. There's several things I would advise your listeners to consider. First, it is true that infant deaths may have gone up in Texas, but one reason for that was also a lot more children were being born in Texas in 2022. September 1st, 2021, the Texas Heartbeat Act took effect. So Texas was really the first state to really enforce a strong pro-life law. And the number of births, in Texas increased that next year by 16,000. So when you have more births, tragically, that also means you have more infant deaths as well. And that's something that the media didn't really report much on. So that's one thing. A second thing I think that it was important for your listeners to know is that the infant mortality rate in Texas was very consistent with averages. There may have been an increase in 2022, but at the same time, if you look at the average infant mortality rate, the 2022 figure was very close to the average between 2007 and 2020. So it wasn't like some big anomaly. It wasn't like there was some big crisis and the numbers spiked up to some number that was just never heard of before. It was consistent with previous averages. The third thing I think is important for your listeners to know is that you have to look at why some of these infants tragically passed away. And a lot of them passed away because of congenital defects or birth defects, and that's tragic. But what you have to remember is that in the past, before the Heartbeat Act took effect, a lot of these children would have been aborted. That tragically many uh, women, many parents do choose abortion when they learn their child has some kind of a birth defect. Because of the Heartbeat Act, these children were carried to term and got to, live out their natural life. The death is obviously tragic, but I think that's a lot better to let people, simply die of, natural causes than have their life be terminated by an abortionist. So I think those are important talking points for your listeners to consider.
Do you think when these studies are put together, they're meant with a preferred outcome in mind, and then they build around that case? Or, I mean, it just seems there's a lack of rigorous research here. It seems like.
Well, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, and I also think it's interesting. It's not interesting. It's not a coincidence that this study was released pretty much on the anniversary of the Dobbs decision. That was not a coincidence. I mean, it really troubles me to see academic journals time the release of these studies in such a way to try to influence, media coverage or even influence how, pending Supreme Court cases are covered. Academic journals really should be in the business of, disseminating high quality, rigorous academic research. You pass this law, this is what happens. This is the effects of a certain kind of program. They should not be editorializing because not only did this journal come out with the study, it also came off the editorial criticizing pro-life laws and criticizing the Texas Heartbeat Act. Academic journals should not be in the business of writing editorials. If I want to read an editorial, I'll buy a newspaper, I'll buy a magazine, I'll go online. I don't read academic journals because I really care, what people think about certain policy issues. I read academic journal articles because I want to learn about high quality, interesting, cutting edge research.
Yeah, it's so ironic that they're, claiming deaths or claiming, putting out this fear mongering basically about, not only do these laws hurt pregnant people, they also hurt infants. And it's like, okay, a pro-life law that's stopping abortion and now you care about death
Mm-hmm.
once the pro-life law is passed. Do they not see the irony there or they just don't care? They're pushing an agenda.
I don't think they care. I mean, I think that you know, there's also very good research showing that Texas Heartbeat Act again resulted in a lot of lives being saved. There's at least three studies that point pretty much the same direction, including one I did, showing that because of the Texas Heartbeat Act, 1,000 more children were being born every month in Texas, and that's a non-trivial number. Do you see a study like that come out on the Dobbs anniversary? Of course you don't. So I think that again, they have a real agenda in mind here. They're not really presenting the full side of things. They're not talking about the success of the Heartbeat Act and saving innocent human lives. It's just very frustrating watching academic journals work in tandem with the mainstream media to frankly confuse and mislead people.
With the in the aftermath of Dobbs and this becoming a state issue, as you look at the sort of the mosaic of state laws around the country, what's working well, what's not, what's sort of your analysis of what we're seeing?
Well, I think the laws we're passing are doing a lot of good. That the Texas was the first state that people forget they actually got that law enforced before Dobbs. They had a very unique kind of enforcement provision that made it difficult to strike down. And then after Dobbs, summer of 2022, a lot of states have gone ahead and passed strong pro-life laws, and we've had been able to analyze birth data. And that's one thing I think researchers are wise to do. Abortions are very hard to count. Women can go out of state, they can go to other countries, they can order chemical abortion drugs through the mail. So one thing I tell pro-life audiences is that abortions are hard to count. Babies are easy to count. Babies crawl, they cry. The government doesn't do a lot of things well, but it does a decent job at counting people who are born. And we do see, at least from one study I saw, that because of the pro-life laws we passed, 32,000 lives were saved in the first 6 months of, I guess, 2023 alone. So you do see tens of thousands of lives being saved. Now, abortion numbers, these laws are doing some good. Abortion numbers haven't necessarily fallen maybe as quickly as we would like overall. I think that the whole question about chemical abortion pills through the mail is something we have to look at very carefully. I think that there are Comstock laws in place that we could enforce. I think there are things we could do to prevent these chemical abortion drugs from being sent through the mail. I think that a pro-life president could do a lot as far as the FDA goes, in terms of putting at least some limits in place on these chemical abortion drugs. I think that's something that we need to kind of do more work on. And also, we just need to keep doing a lot of things to build a culture of life. Overturning Roe v. Wade was a big victory for us, but it was not the be all and end all. It kind of reminds me of the Winston Churchill quote: "This isn't the end. It's not even the beginning of the end, but it may well be the end of the beginning." And we obviously, laws are important. They do some good. We still have to keep up, education efforts. We still need to support our pregnancy help centers. They're really on the front lines in almost every city, really building a culture of life. So we just can't put our feet up and say Roe's overturned, we're done. No, we still got quite a lot of work cut out for us building a culture of life.
Yeah. You mentioned the role of the president and the presidency and what that office is able to do through things like the FDA. I've seen before, and probably a lot of people have heard this argument that the sharpest drops in the abortion rates come under Democrat
Mm-hmm.
presidents. Is that accurate? Can you kind of walk us through that
Yeah,
fact?
it's interesting. At the Turtle Ocean Institute, we call this the whack-a-mole game. It doesn't matter how many times we smack this thing down; it just keeps coming up again and again. It's very misleading. I mean, what you have happened is, if you want to look at abortion trends, after Roe v. Wade, abortion numbers go up. Unsurprisingly, Roe v. Wade effectively legalized abortion in all 50 states for all 9 months of pregnancy. The abortion rate peaked in 1980. And between 1980 and 2017, it fell. A couple of hiccups here and there, but pretty much every year it fell. So you just have is a very durable, long-term abortion decline that persisted through both Democratic and Republican presidential administrations. The abortion rate fell under President Reagan, under President George H.W. Bush, under Bill Clinton, under George W. Bush, and under President Obama. So it's just been a durable decline that's persisted throughout a bunch of presidents, both Democrat and Republican. And the reasons for this decline have been a lot of things that pro-lifers and Republicans did. 1980 was really the first year we had the Hyde Amendment in place. That was the Supreme Court finally upheld the Hyde Amendment and got the federal government really out of the business of paying for elective abortions through Medicaid. That saves probably 50, 60,000 lives a year, according to my calculations. Also, even though it took us a while to get Roe v. Wade overturned, the judges the Republicans did appoint did uphold some incremental pro-life laws, like parental involvement laws, waiting periods, informed consent laws. These laws aren't magical, but they do a little bit of good at the margin. So, again, it's very misleading to sit there and say that, abortions go up under Republican presidents and down under Democrats. You saw a durable decline starting in 1980, just persisted through both Democratic and Republican presidential administrations.
As we sit here and we talk today, there's a lot of consternation over the Republican Party platform and the how the party or really the Trump administration, if Trump wins again, how they would address abortion seems to be a departure away from any kind of national ban or any kind of national policy. He's saying this is a state issue. What are the pluses and minuses of that in your view?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm disappointed that they pulled the pro-life plank from the platform. That every, I think, Republican platform since 1980 included a human life amendment. And this is something that we fought for a long time. And at one point, put up with a lot of resistance. I mean, in the 90s, there was a real backlash. I'm old enough to remember, 1992, 1996. People thought these pro choice governors were the new direction for the party. They thought Christine Todd Whitman and William Weld and Pete Wilson were going to be the future. And they weren't. All these individuals kind of faded from the national scene, and it was pro life candidates who received endorsements, got nominations, and ended up winning. So we've kind of faced a lot more internal opposition. In fact, I think the group Republicans for Choice disbanded at a certain point. At one point, they would show up at the convention and cause problems or make noise. They don't do that anymore because they're gone. They don't exist anymore. So I think that just backtracking from that plank, was a mistake. Uh, does it make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things? I'm not convinced it does necessarily. I mean, platforms aren't legally binding. They don't. The president's free to embrace the plank. He's free to ignore it. I do think that it's disappointing that they didn't put language about both contraception and IVF in the platform. I think that was just uncalled for. There's no reason to raise those issues. There's not some big contraception crisis out there. People who want contraception can get it. I think the efforts to promote contraception use tend to be counterproductive. My point of view may not be the same as others, but I oppose IVF. I don't think you should be creating embryos and freezing them. I think it's a very anti-life policy. I don't think the Republicans had even venture into that issue, but they chose to do so. So yeah, the platform is not what I would want. It is a disappointment. That said, Donald Trump, if he's elected, can still do some good things for us. Judicial nominations are still important. That's one of those important things the president does. And I will say to his credit, during his first term, Donald Trump did deliver on judges. All three Supreme Court judges he nominated voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, those are all excellent choices. And there's also a lot of things he can do with executive branch appointments. Again, I would hope that we have some influence there. I hope he appoints better people to the FDA. The Biden administration has just let them pretty much do what they want regarding chemical abortion pills. I think it's just ridiculous that women can obtain these pills without an in-person medical exam. Again, I think that these pills do have some serious health risks. If a woman's in ectopic pregnancy and she obtains a chemical abortion, that can be fatal. If she's further along in gestation, she realizes and has a chemical abortion, that could pose some very serious negative health consequences. So, I'm not thrilled right now with the platform, but I'm still realizing that there's going to be one of two parties will win. It's either going to be Trump, the Republicans, or Biden, or whoever replaces Biden, the Democrats. And Trump is in a much better position to do things for us than Joe Biden or whoever the Democrats may nominate in his place, should it come down to that.
Why do you think our issue is seen as a political loser? And do you think that's a reality?
I'll say this. I think that some Republicans are just scared. I think they spend too much time in D.C. and reading, listening to the mainstream media. I think that the world outside Washington D.C., as someone who lives in D.C., is a lot different than what you hear and see in D.C. I think a lot of the Republicans, frankly, are scared about what happened with some of the ballot propositions. Pro-lifers have not done well at these statewide ballot questions since Dobbs. The problem that we run into very often is funding, though. I think that the other side. There's a lot of research on direct democracy that shows that the side that spends the most is at a big advantage. Abortion is a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country. They have a lot of financial resources. They pour them into these direct democracy campaigns, and the other side has notched some victories. But statewide pro-life candidates have done very well since Dobbs, including Republicans who signed strong pro-life laws. You look at Ron DeSantis in Florida; he won by a large margin. You look at Brian Kemp in Georgia; he won by a large margin. Mike DeWine in Ohio, Greg Abbott in Texas, and they were running against Democrats who were, experienced candidates who raised a lot of money, who really tried to make abortion a big issue in that campaign, and all these Republican governors who signed very strong pro-life laws all won, and all won by big, big margins. So, I think that if you can't use the ostrich strategy, you can't stick your head in the sand. My colleague at Susan B. Anthony, Marjorie Felser says we need the peacock strategy. Make the case for the strong case for the pro-life laws. The good that we're doing, and I think that I think a lot of Republicans are scared, and there may be individual races and individual circumstances where sure it may have been a liability. I will say the other side is more organized and more active than they usually are. We do need to be aware of that, but we shouldn't despair and we shouldn't run and hide. I think that we have good arguments. We can make them in a compelling way, and I think we can certainly win on this issue in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah. A lot of states are facing ballot initiatives. What can we learn from some of the states where that has failed, like Ohio? What should some of the states be doing differently this year where Ohio failed?
That's a really good question. I think one issue we had in Ohio is that the other side could really throw the kitchen sink at us because that was the only state where there was an abortion question on the ballot. I mean, again, keep in mind they have the resources spread out. They have a lot of resources, but they're going to be trying to elect Democrats and pro-abortion politicians to various higher offices. They can't just focus all their effort and resources on one state. I will say that. Another thing that I would tell people is that one issue I think we should raise a lot more than we do is the question of Medicaid funding, especially taxpayer funding for abortion. I think if you look at a lot of the ways these ballot propositions are worded, they protect abortion in very expansive ways. And some of them are saying you can't do anything that would delay or inhibit somebody from getting an abortion. There's at least 10 states that fund abortion through Medicaid because of a court ruling. And the ruling and the guarantees for abortion are very tenuous in these state constitutions. It's on a privacy right or an equal rights ground or something tenuous. None of these state constitutions actually comes out and explicitly guarantees abortion the way these ballot propositions do. So taxpayer funding for abortion always pulls very badly. I think that's a very strong issue for us to raise. And I also just think we need to raise money early, get on the air early, do the tedious grassroots work of just knocking on doors, phoning people. Grassroots organizing is not fun or pleasant, but it does work. And I just think we need to have a good ground game in these states as well.
I've seen you've done some analysis and postmortem on Ohio, and you've dug into the numbers quite a bit. Where do you land on? I mean, as you look at the different messages, what works, what doesn't work, things of that nature. There seems to be a debate internally in our movement that, well, we need to focus on the baby. We need to focus on the reality of what they're doing to the baby. But then there's polling data that says, no, this is really about the woman. This is about the mother. We need to make the argument about her. As you look at the different, as you look at the data, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. Because I actually do see merit in both sides. Um, I mean, one thing I will say is that sometimes the ads that pro-life activists like aren't necessarily the ones that others find persuasive. We don't need to persuade ourselves. We're already pro-life. We need to persuade undecided voters. I do think that a motherhood for the purpose of these ballot propositions, just trying to get across the finish line. I am more sympathetic to kind of a motherhood, mother-centric approach. Most people, are not ideological. Most people are practical. And I think that what has hurt us in some of these ballot propositions is that some people who may not like abortion are concerned that if you let this pro-life law take effect, my sister, my niece, my daughter, my aunt won't get the health care she needs. And that just is a bad image and a bad message for the pro-life movement. Nobody wants. A lot of people don't are concerned about some badly drafted or badly thought out pro-life law harming a female friend or relative that they care about. So I think that a motherhood approach would make a lot of sense. I think we need to reassure people that the pro-life laws that we do have in place don't stop pregnant women from getting the health care they need. A pregnant woman does not need to be at death's door to get assistance from a doctor. We can treat both mother and child and love them both. And that we can help pregnant women in need. A lot of us in the pro-life movement are very familiar with pregnancy help centers, but a lot of people outside the movement aren't. As someone who sidewalk counsels, people are very surprised to realize that there is a nonprofit not far from them that has a maternity home that will put them up, that can offer financial help or other kinds of assistance. So I think we just need to make the case that passing a pro-life law is not some big plunge into the unknown. There's support for people, there's resources for people, healthcare is available for people. There's not going to be the human suffering our opponents are predicting will not come to pass. So that's kind of at least my approach, just as far as getting across the finish line on some of these ballot propositions.
Yeah. What do you think are some ways that the pro-life movement can better message about the fact that pregnancy centers exist and maternity homes exist and some of these other faith-based or nonprofit organizations exist to help women? Because I think a lot of people are swayed by, well, I don't want to pass any legislation or I don't want to pass any ballot initiative that might harm women.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we do a better job of messaging the resources that are available for women?
It's kind of interesting. I think that Notre Dame, some researchers at the McGrath Center, kind of looked at this very question, and they kind of asked, a lot of surveys and research on abortion just asked, like, are you pro-life or pro-choice? Do you think there should be taxpayer funding for abortion? And there's nothing wrong with these questions, but the McGrath Center did something. They asked open-ended questions. Why do you support legal abortion? Why are you pro-life? And some people had personal circumstances or personal involvement with non-intended pregnancy, and sometimes that affected them. And sometimes people just said, I'm not wild about abortion, but I'm also concerned about what happens to women, if they do face unintended pregnancy, or they're concerned about children being put into a foster care system that isn't very good. And those of us, who are pro-life want to tear our hair out. There are people born into crummy circumstances every day. And, we don't view it as compassionate to, engage in acts of infanticide because of that. But that's where people are. And what motivates some, concern and support for abortion is, that those with unintended pregnancies may suffer and that children whose conception is unintended may suffer. And we have to show that no, there are compassionate alternatives for both mother and child and that there are resources available. And certainly working to improve the foster care system, certainly working to make adoption easier. These are important things I think we need to work on. I think we need to be very kind of holistic in our approach. And again, I think that just, running the sorts of ads on TV that feature women who have unintended pregnancies who are in good, stable situations and are glad they made the decision they did, I think that can be persuasive. I think that, just the individual anecdotes, the stories, that's what tends to motivate people a lot. And I just think we need more and frankly better stories in the pro-life movement.
Well, it sounds like we have our work cut out for us. I'm really grateful for the work that you do to supply information to the pro-life movement and the different pro-life organizations that are out there doing the work. And tell us where people can find your work and find articles you've written, things like that.
Yeah, I'm a scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. It's the research education arm of Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. I blog frequently for National Review Online. Please check out their website. I'm there once a week, usually with blog posts offering some pro-life commentary. The best way to really track me is Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Michael_J_new. That's @Michael_J_new. I tweet out pro-life commentary almost every day. If you listen to the show, you probably have some Facebook friends with me in common. You can look me up on Facebook and friend me, and I do post my articles there as well. But I'd say my Twitter account's the best way to stay in touch with me. And again, that's @Michael_J_new.
And if you do follow him on Twitter, you'll find what a world-class softball player he is. You'll be able to.
Well, we won our first game of the. Well, actually, I had my first on-field win earlier this week. I wouldn't say I'm a world-class player, but I fight the good fight.
There you go. Fighting the good fight on all fronts, I see. Well, thank you very much, Dr. New, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated. God bless.
Thanks again for listening to Dear Jane.
You can follow along every day on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And make sure you also are subscribed so you never miss an episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. Ring that bell so you're notified and you never miss an episode.